welcome to another edition of Healthy Living. I'm Aisha Salihu. The burden of drug and substance abuse is on the rise and becoming a public health concern. Nigeria, which is the most populous country in Africa, has developed a reputation as a center for drug trafficking and usage, mostly among the youth population. According to the 2018 United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime report, drug use in Nigeria, the first large-scale nationwide national drug use survey in Nigeria, 1 in 7 persons aged 15 to 65 years had used a drug in the past year. Also, 1 in 5 individuals who had used drug in the past year is suffering from drug-related disorders. Drug abuse has been a cause of many criminal offenses such as theft, burglary, sex work, and shoplifting. Despite the multicultural nature of the Nigerian population, there is a consistent outcry from both the public, police, preachers, health professionals, teachers, regulatory agencies, and parents on the growing burden of drug and substance abuse in the country.
Substance abuse is also drug abuse because it's not just drugs that are abused in some cases. So they define substance abuse as the hazardous use or injurious use of psychoactive substances like alcohol and illicit drugs for whatever feeling an individual intends to get from using those substances. Basically, pharmaceuticals could be drugs, it could be medical devices. So not all pharmaceuticals are drugs. There are drugs and there are other pharmaceutical equipment and medical devices.
So what then are the main causes or factors that influence drug and substance abuse?
Most people that abuse substances, the aim is to have an effect, to derive a particular kind of effect from using those items. Now, in Nigeria, for instance, the most abused substance is cannabis. Cannabis is a drug. However, there are people that abuse glue. Glues obtained from tree trunks, and those glues are not drugs. So in as much as you could use interchangeably drug abuse and substance abuse, there are some substances that are abused that are not drugs, whereas all drugs that are abused are substances. One of the factors that influences people going into drug abuse is it could be peer pressure, it could be environmental exposure, and there is a genetic factor to it because most people that are born in homes where one or both parents abuse substances, alcohol or cannabis or any drug, they have a higher chance of growing to abuse substances either once or over time. So you have the environmental factors like peer pressure. Could be peer pressure encompasses wanting to impress your friends. It could be learning from friends that these substances could give a euphoric effect or help you forget your worries. And it could also be as a result of dependence on medications. Some of these medications that are abused are actually used for therapeutic purposes, but continuous use and the body becoming tolerant to the dose that is supposed to elicit a therapeutic effect can make the individual keep increasing the dose against doctor's advice to the point that it is no longer a misuse of drug but an abuse of that substance, because the dose that the person requires to have a feeling of remission from whatever the person is taking those medications for increases with time when the body gets tolerant to those medications. So people can unintentionally abuse medication, and some people can intentionally abuse those drugs.
Briefly differentiate between the misuse of drug and drug abuse.
Okay, misuse of drugs could be not taking the appropriate dose of the medication when it is recommended or prescribed by a physician. For instance, a physician prescribe the minimum daily dose of a medication, say analgesic like cocodamol, and the prescribed dose for the patient is 8 milligram, 500 milligram of the two drug, the codeine and the paracetamol component of it, and the patient takes the medication, and over time he or she realizes that on taking that same dose of this drug, he doesn't have relief from the pain, and he decides to increase the dose by himself. He increases it, and over time that increment works for a while and it requires an additional step. Instead of going to meet the physician to complain that I don't have relief from the pain, you see, they keep increasing, and they have the feeling that without the medication they will be in constant pain. So that is usually unintentional drug misuse / abuse. But for the abuse of illicit substances, it is usually intentional, because most times hospitals don't recommend outpatient use of, say, cocaine or most of these illicit substances. I know that recently there have been some countries that legalized the use of medicinal cannabis, but that is not applicable to Nigeria. So you cannot say somebody is using a medically recommended cannabis in Nigeria because it is not covered by the laws of the country. So most of the illicit substances that people abuse, it is an intentional abuse to death.
You did mention prescription-only medications. So what are these prescription-only medications that are being abused?
Okay, drugs that are abused are stimulants, they could be depressants, they could be analgesic, especially the opioids and opiates. They could also be hallucinogenic agents, and so basically that is the classification, because the reasons why people abuse drug is based on either it causes a depressive state or it stimulates the brain receptors to give a euphoric feeling, or it causes hallucination. Because even the analgesics, the opioids and opiates that are commonly abused, they usually cause a depression. And when they act on the receptors in the body, they make the person not to feel pains.
So what are the effects of drug abuse?
There are a lot of effects of drug abuse. For the stimulants, for instance, because the effect of stimulants is different from the effects of depressants. For drugs that are stimulants that are abused, they could lead to insomnia, that's loss of sleep. They could lead to insomnia. They could lead to loss of appetite. They could lead to paranoia. They could lead to lack of coordination and hyperactivity. and most of them, it manifests physically. The person have dilated pupils and glassy eyes. The person have either increased appetite or loss of appetite. So for the depressants, basically, people that abuse those substances could, exhibit lack of interest and visible depressive states, lack of interest, loss of appetite, disorientation, and loss of interest in a lot of activities that ordinarily they would see themselves participating in. So like I said, for the stimulants, the effect of stimulants and depressants can be overlapping, because in the human brain there is something called inhibition of inhibitors. So most times, if the depressants should act on the receptor for inhibition, and it's inhibited, the person will have a kind of stimulant effect. So basically, you have fatigue, you can have psychosis from drug abuse, you can have headache, you can have increased heart rate, you can have stomach upset, you can have insomnia, loss of appetite, and a whole lot. One of the ways to control drug abuse lies on the individual. So the individual approach is the person should be interested in staying away from substances that can be abused. Now, this is taking into consideration people that abuse substances not for medical use. Now, for drug abuse due to dependence on a therapeutic agent, most of the substances that could be abused have antidotes. Like people that abuse opioids and opiates, there are drugs like naloxone, naltrexone that is used as an antidote to neutralize the effect of those substances. Now, there are also rehabilitation centers for both categories of abuse. For both categories of abuse. So some drugs have antidotes, and some just require a lot of counseling and rehabilitation processes to give the person the reason not to abuse those drugs, because this side effect that we mentioned could lead to death. Because substance abuse predisposes to death, because there is heart damage, there is lung damage, there is kidney damage from abuse of this, there's liver damage. So abuse of drugs is very detrimental, and people should have the realization that if you want to live, if you want to have a good quality of life, you have to desist from that. I think there are a lot of neuropsychiatric hospitals that help manage not just people with psychiatric disorder, but also those that have disorders from abuse of substances. So it's more of lifestyle modification, and where there is an antidote that is indicated, antidotes are used, a counseling section. So these are the basic ways in which drug abuse can be controlled. On the side of the pharmaceutical companies, sometimes in 2017 or so, the government made a legislation to ban the use of codeine in cough syrups. Codeine is actually an antitussive agent, but it was prone to abuse by a lot of people, because people don't just source those medications from physicians or pharmacies. They go ahead to to buy in large quantities and abuse them. So such legislation actually helps to minimize drug abuse cases. Now, the Nigeria drug distribution system is quite chaotic. So drugs are in the hands of people that are not pharmacists or trained to handle medications. And when the system is chaotic, you see a situation where people that are not meant to handle some medication, especially the prescription-only medications, have access to it. And if somebody does not understand the implication of using that drug, basically the person may just be, dispensing that. And the regulatory aspect, something that the Pharmacists Council of Nigeria, which is charged with the responsibility of regulating pharmacy practice in Nigeria, they're doing their best in enforcement, but it is not enough. We need a law that is stringent. Like when the federal government came up with the ban on codeine, it was effective because it was a law. When there is a law backing something, it's easier to implement. But when such laws exist and you have a chaotic supply chain, you may not be able to have much control over such. So if drugs are in the hands of pharmacists, who are the legal people that are supposed to handle drugs, especially prescription medication, but most of these medications that are abused are prescription only medication, but people still get access to them. So laws guiding against selling of drugs outside a registered pharmacy would actually help minimize and curtail, if not eradicate, drug abuse situations.
We've been talking largely about drug abuse. What are the sources of these drugs?
Okay, I mentioned that it is quite unfortunate that the Nigerian drug distribution system is quite chaotic. The Pharmaceutical Society of Nigeria, the Pharmacists Council of Nigeria has always been making calls to the federal government to close down these open drug markets that have besieged us. Some of the drugs that are abused are imported. Some of them are manufactured here. But most of these active ingredients are imported. So you see, most people that abuse these substances, they get them from patent medicine dealers, some get it from pharmacy, and some get it from illegal drug dealers. So if there was proper control on the distribution of drug in the country, I think drug abuse can be curtailed, because somebody have to bring in those drugs for people to have access to abusing those drugs. But for the fact that the distribution of these drugs are not fully controlled by people that are licensed to have control over them, it's quite difficult to just point a particular finger to a source of drugs. So these drugs are in the system and are in Nigeria for people to have access to abusing those drugs. Because since we are talking of prescription-only medications that are abused, because other substances that are abused, like the illicit drugs, are basically smuggled by illegal drug dealers. And so the major issue is reducing drug abuse of prescription medications.
So let's talk about management techniques and treatment procedures.
I mentioned that some drugs have antidotes. Some drugs have antidotes, like the opioids have antidotes like naltrexone and naloxone. So in the case, most cases that we see are usually when the patient overdose on a medication and the person is rushed to the hospital and the hospital have to intervene and those drugs are used. So most drugs that are abused have their antidotes. Okay, but use of antidotes alone is not enough. You have to have the whole rehabilitation process, like the counseling section, lifestyle modification, and where indicated, drugs. But drugs that are usually used are usually in acute situations, like alcohol abuse is usually discouraged by the use of some drugs called disulfiram, so which makes people that abuse alcohol to have a very unpleasant experience on drinking, so it discourages them from continuing. So there are some medical procedures that help discourage people from abusing drugs while encouraging them to take up a particular lifestyle that is beneficial to them. So it is a combination of lifestyle changes and medical intervention, like psychological intervention in forms of counseling and determination by the person, the patient in question, to want to stop drug abuse.
The dangers of drug abuse of all sorts confront Nigerians every day on the roads, workplace, schools, and at the home, among others. Let's go on a quick break and we'll be right back.
This man has been a drug addict for a number of years.
I started using drugs 6 years ago, and honestly, since then it has been horrific for me in my education basis, spiritual basis, and also I can say physically. But throughout those 6 years, it has been like unbearable for me. So my dad resorted to like taking me to a rehabilitation center just like this. So honestly, my recovery has been not that easy, because as an addict, when coming out of addiction, is like I would say it's like passing through hell on earth.
NDLEA authorities say between January and November 2021, 92 clients have been rehabilitated, including women. But that was possible after some series of coaching.
We have a lot of things. In this place, we have programs for them. From day one you started, you come to this place, we put you on our program. We have timetable that from morning till evening, we make sure that they are busy doing one or two things. You can see the sports facilities. We have computer center. Computer center is there, that if you get to our computer center, this is a place we train them on how to do this. We have a tailoring session.
This unnamed man is recovering from his drug addiction and is now advocating for attitudinal change among other young Nigerians.
Everything is possible, depending how strong or how determined you are. And also my message to them is that there is still life after addiction, there is still hope after addiction.
The facility has a tailoring and computer training centers preparing the clients for reintegration.
Some of our discharged clients, they are now on their own, because after the counseling treatment and care, so another phase is now to reintegrate them back to the society, to fit into the society.
This is a computer center, one of the centers that keeps all the clients here busy who are on rehabilitation at the rehabilitation center of the NDLEA here in Gombe. And this place has more than 10 computers. It is using electricity and a solar system. In case of eventuality of unavailability of electricity, and as you can see here, is one of the clients learning some stuff that will help him forget about addiction on this computer system. Between 2015 and 2016, Gombe was announced as one of the states with highest prevalence rate of drug abuse, with data ranging between 21 and 33%. But according to the NDLEA, there has been a lot of progress in addressing the menace.
From January to date, the total arrest made is 193 persons, including women. We have a total seizure of 217.344 kilograms of various illicit drugs.
The prevalence of drug and substance abuse in Nigeria and its negative impact on public health and safety necessitate that all hands be on deck to curtail the challenge. Schools, communities, voluntary organizations, and religious bodies should embark on drug abuse enlightenment, treatment, and prevention campaigns. There is no better time than now for all relevant stakeholders to rise and join the crusade to make Nigeria a better and safer nation, especially for the youth, who are the leaders of tomorrow. We've come to the end of this edition of Healthy Living. Join us again another time. I'm Aisha Salihu.